Welcome to Her Secret Truth, a place where the truth always comes out. Here you'll hear stories of family betrayals, hidden secrets, and shocking revelations. Every story is a step closer to the truth someone tried to hide. Subscribe to Her Secret Truth so you don't miss new stories you won't be able to stop watching. When I turned 65, I organized a family party. No one showed up. On that very same day, my daughter-in-law shared photos of everyone enjoying a cruise. I simply smiled. When they returned, I gave her a DNA test that made her face turn pale. I am glad you are here with me. Stay with my story until the end, and leave a comment telling me the city you are watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I spent 3 weeks preparing for my 65th birthday celebration. 3 full weeks choosing the right menu, decorating the dining room with fresh flowers, and calling everyone to make sure they would come. I even bought a new dress, navy blue with small pearl buttons, the kind Nathan always said made me look elegant. The table was set for 8 people. Each place had a card written in my neatest handwriting. Nathan Meadow. Little Ryan, who had just turned 7. Sweet Sophie, who was 5. My sister Helen, her husband George, and of course myself at the head of the table, where I could see everyone's faces as we celebrated together. By that time, no one had arrived. I checked my phone 3 times, wondering if I had made a mistake with the time. But it was clearly written in my calendar. Birthday dinner at 6 in the evening. I had sent reminders to everyone just 2 days earlier. At some point I called Nathan, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I tried Meadow's phone. The same result. Helen did not answer either, which was unusual because she always picked up on the second ring. I stood in the dining room, looking at the untouched plates. The candles I had lit an hour earlier had already burned down to short stubs. The roast in the oven was getting cold. The chocolate cake I had spent the entire morning baking sat untouched on the kitchen counter. I told myself that maybe there was traffic or something unexpected had happened at the last moment. Things like that can happen. Even so, my chest felt tight, and my hands would not stop shaking. By later that evening, I understood they were not coming. I sat down heavily in my chair and stared at the empty seats around me. This was not just about being late. It was something completely different. The silence in my house felt strange, not calm but hollow, as if the house itself was holding its breath. That was when I made the mistake of opening Facebook. At the top of my feed was a photo that made my blood run cold. Meadow looked radiant in a flowing white sundress. Her arm was around Nathan, who was smiling brighter than I had seen in months. Behind them, the deep blue ocean stretched endlessly. The caption said that they were living their best life on the Mediterranean and feeling grateful for such an amazing family trip. I scrolled further. There were photos of Ryan and Sophie building sandcastles on a perfect beach. Helen and George were holding cocktails at what looked like an elegant bar on a ship. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. The timestamp showed the photos had been posted about an hour earlier, while I had been sitting at home waiting for them. They were far away, raising champagne glasses and laughing during a sunset dinner on a cruise ship. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break but crack, like ice on a lake when the temperature suddenly drops. They had planned this, all of them. Meadow had arranged a family trip that deliberately excluded me, scheduled it on my birthday, and somehow convinced everyone to go along with it. Even Helen, my own sister, who had helped me choose decorations for this party just a week earlier. I stared at the photo until my eyes began to burn. Meadow's smile seemed especially bright, almost triumphant. She stood exactly where I should have been. At the center of my family, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me most. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Nathan. He wrote that he was sorry and explained that he had forgotten to mention they would be out of town that week. He added that Meadow had booked a surprise trip and wished me a happy birthday anyway. Forgotten to mention. As if a Mediterranean cruise was something you could casually forget to tell your mother about. As if planning it on my birthday was just a coincidence. I carefully set the phone down, afraid I might throw it if I held it any longer. The roast was completely cold now. I walked into the kitchen and turned off the oven, my movements feeling automatic and unfamiliar. It was as if I was watching myself from the outside, seeing a sad woman in a navy blue dress cleaning up a dinner no one came to eat. I wrapped the cake and placed it in the refrigerator. I blew out what was left of the candles. Then I started putting the good china back into the cabinet, each plate touching the others with a sound that felt too loud in the quiet house. Meadow had won something that night, although I was not entirely sure what kind of game had been played. All I knew was that for the first time in my 65 years, I felt truly invisible. Not just overlooked or forgotten but erased. As I turned off the dining room lights, I saw my reflection in the dark window. I looked smaller, somehow diminished. The woman staring back at me had spent decades being the family peacekeeper. The one who smoothed over arguments and remembered everyone's birthdays and anniversaries. The one who always put family first. And they had all chosen to spend my birthday pretending that I did not exist. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the one before. The next day, I would have to deal with the aftermath, the insincere apologies, the excuses about miscommunication, and Meadow's gentle voice explaining that the trip had been planned months earlier and there had been nothing they could do. But that night, I needed to sit with the pain and truly feel it. Because something inside me told me this was not just about a missed birthday party. It was something much bigger and far more deliberate than I had ever imagined. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my thoughts going over every family gathering from the past 5 years. That birthday came to mind, the one that was not simply forgotten but deliberately ruined. And as the hours slowly passed, other memories began to surface, each one more unsettling than the last. Ryan's 4th birthday party. I had been so excited to see him blow out his candles. But when I arrived at the place, Meadow met me at the door with her usual apologetic smile. She explained that Nathan must not have told me, and that they had to move the party to the next day because a small emergency had come up. But I could hear children laughing inside. I could see balloons through the window. When I called Nathan later, he sounded genuinely confused. He told me that the party was definitely happening that day, and suggested that Meadow must have mixed up the dates. Then there was Sophie's first day of kindergarten. I had asked Meadow 3 times what time they would be taking her so I could be there with my camera. She said they were going very early, around 7 in the morning, and added that it might be too early for me. When I showed up anyway, the teacher told me Sophie had arrived at the usual time. I had missed her walking into her classroom. I had missed her small, nervous wave goodbye to Nathan. Last Christmas followed the same pattern. Meadow called me 2 days before, her voice tight with what sounded like concern. She explained that Nathan had been feeling overwhelmed with work, and had asked to keep Christmas dinner small that year. Only immediate family. I spent Christmas alone, reheating leftovers and watching old movies. Later, I learned from Helen what had really happened. She had seen the photos online. There had been 20 people there, including Nathan's college friends and several neighbors. Everyone had been there. Everyone except me. Each memory felt like a puzzle piece falling into place, forming a picture I had been too blind to see. This was not a pattern of miscommunication or innocent scheduling issues. This was something systematic and carefully planned. I got up and made coffee as the sun began to rise, my hands still shaking from exhaustion and something else, a growing sense of dread. I took my phone and started scrolling through Meadow's social media posts from the past year, really looking at them for the first time. There she was at Ryan's school play, sitting in the front row next to Nathan. I remembered asking about that play, and she had told me it was canceled because of a flu outbreak. There she was at Sophie's dance recital, the one Meadow had described as just a practice session, nothing special. Photo after photo showed family moments I had been excluded from, each one with captions about precious memories, and feeling blessed to have those people in her life. The cruelest part was how natural it all looked. Meadow's arm around Nathan, the children close to their parents, everyone smiling as if they truly belonged together, as if they were complete without me. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the garden I had planted when Nathan was a boy. He used to help me take care of those flower beds, his small hands careful with the delicate stems. When had I lost him? When had he stopped seeing me as important to his happiness? The answer came to me clearly. It happened when Meadow entered our lives. Before her, Nathan called me twice a week. We had regular dinners every other Sunday. He would ask for my advice about work, and he would share stories about his day. He was my son, my friend, my connection to a future I had helped create. Meadow changed that slowly, so gradually that I did not notice it until it was already too late. At first, the Sunday dinners became once a month. Nathan explained that Meadow had been planning elaborate meals, and that she enjoyed having weekends just for themselves. Then the phone calls became less frequent, turning into short check-ins on holidays. He would apologize and explain that their schedule was very busy. She never said anything directly against me. That would have been too obvious and too easy to challenge. Instead, she worked in the spaces between words, in the silence that followed her suggestions. She would make quiet remarks, implying that I seemed tired lately and suggesting that maybe it would be better not to involve me with the children that weekend. I remembered seeing your mother at the grocery store yesterday. She seemed a little confused about something. It made me wonder if she was really doing all right living on her own. Those kinds of comments carried subtle suggestions that I was becoming a burden, someone to worry about rather than include. I thought about how she hugged me at family gatherings, always holding on just a little too long, her hand gently rubbing my back as if I were a fragile elderly relative who needed comfort, not an equal part of the family. I noticed the way she would interrupt whenever I spoke with the children, smoothly shifting their attention elsewhere. She would say that Grandma Eleanor had a long day, and suggest they go show their father a new toy instead. And Nathan, my kind and trusting son, had taken all of it in without questioning it. Over time he began looking at me the same way Meadow did, with a mix of affection and quiet pity, as if I were something still loved but no longer truly important. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. Nathan's name appeared on the screen. He greeted me warmly, his voice light and relaxed in a way that made my chest ache. He said he wanted to wish me a happy belated birthday and apologize for missing it, adding that the trip had been incredible, and that Meadow had done an amazing job planning everything. I tightened my grip on the phone and told him that I had seen the photos. He sounded pleased and mentioned that Meadow had been posting constantly. He talked about how much fun the children were having. Ryan learning to snorkel and Sophie making a new friend from Boston. He said I would have loved seeing them. I thought to myself that from where I had been sitting, it seemed like no one had even noticed my absence. I carefully mentioned that the trip seemed very last minute. He agreed enthusiastically, saying Meadow had found a great deal and acted on it right away, adding that spontaneity was one of the things he loved about her. Spontaneous. That was the word he used to describe booking a cruise on his mother's birthday. I began to say his name, then stopped. What could I possibly tell him? That his wife had been manipulating him? That she had spent years quietly pushing me out of his life? He would think I was jealous or bitter, unable to accept that he had grown up and moved on. Maybe I was all of those things. But I was also right. He asked if everything was okay, saying I sounded a little off. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of all the moments I had missed, all the times I had been erased from my own family's story. I told him I was fine, just tired. He told me to get some rest and said they would be back the following week, promising they would plan something special to make up for missing my birthday. Another promise that I already knew Meadow would find a way to undo. After the call ended, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, watching the light shift as the morning slowly turned into afternoon. I thought about the years ahead. More birthdays spent alone. More milestones of my grandchildren that I would miss. More family photos where my absence would be so complete it would feel as though I had never existed. For the first time since my husband passed away 8 years ago, I felt truly alone. Not because of death this time, but because of something that felt even worse, the slow, deliberate removal of my place in the only family I had left. But as anger began to rise inside me, strong and undeniable, I realized something else. I was not going to disappear quietly. If Meadow wanted to play games, she had chosen the wrong person. I had raised Nathan on my own after his father left. I had worked 2 jobs to put him through college. I had given up my own dreams to make sure he had every opportunity. I had earned my place in this family, and I was not going to give it up without a fight. I just needed to understand what I was really fighting against. It was Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after the birthday party that never happened, when the doorbell rang. I was still in my robe, holding my second cup of coffee and looking at the stack of thank you cards I had bought for a celebration that never took place. The sound startled me. I was not expecting anyone. Unexpected visitors had become rare in my quiet, carefully contained life. I looked through the peephole and saw a man I did not recognize, likely in his mid-40s, with dark hair and deep lines of worry around his eyes. He was dressed well, but his clothes looked slightly rumpled, as if he had been traveling. His hands were buried in his coat pockets, and he kept glancing around nervously, as though unsure if he should even be there. First, I almost did not answer. After everything that had happened with the cruise, I had no patience for strangers. But there was something about the way he stood there, hesitant, gathering courage, that made me pause. I asked through the door if I could help him. He carefully asked if I was Mrs. Whitaker, specifically Eleanor Whitaker, Nathan's mother. My chest tightened at once. I asked who he was and how he knew my son's name. There was a brief pause before he spoke again. He introduced himself as Victor Lynn and said he needed to talk to me about Meadow. I opened the door slowly, keeping the chain still latched. I asked what this had to do with Meadow. Victor Lynn looked even more nervous up close. His hands were shaking slightly, and there were dark circles under his eyes, as if he had not slept for days. He said that what he was about to tell me would sound crazy, but he believed his son might be living in my son's house. The chain suddenly felt heavy in my hands. I asked what he meant. He said the name Ryan, and it hit me like a physical. He described a little boy, 7 years old, with brown hair and a scar on his chin from falling off his bike when he was 4. I stared at him, my thoughts spinning. Ryan did have a scar on his chin. Nathan had told me about that accident, how frightened they had been rushing him to the emergency room. But how could this stranger possibly know that? I told him he should come inside, my voice barely above a whisper. Victor Lynn sat on my couch as if he might get up and leave at any second. I offered him coffee, but he refused, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, his knuckles turning white. He said he did not know where to begin and repeated that it would sound unbelievable. I told him to try, explaining that I had already had a very strange week. He took a shaky breath. He said that he and Meadow had been together for 2 years, before she ever met my son or got married. They had lived together and even talked about marriage. Then she became pregnant. My coffee cup suddenly felt too heavy, and I carefully set it down, afraid I might drop it. He continued, saying he had been incredibly happy at the time. He had wanted to marry her right away and start building a life together. But Meadow kept delaying, saying she needed time and was not ready for such a big step. Then one day he came home from work and she was gone. Everything was gone. All of her belongings had disappeared, as if she had never lived there at all. I asked if he had tried to find her. He said of course he had. For months he searched. He filed a missing person report, hired a private investigator, and posted everywhere he could think of online. Nothing. It was as if she had vanished completely. He rubbed his face with both hands and said the investigator eventually told him to stop looking, explaining that sometimes people simply do not want to be found. I began to feel sick. I asked what this had to do with Ryan. He said that 3 months ago, he had been at a conference in Sacramento. During a lunch break while walking downtown, he saw Meadow. And with her was a little boy who looked exactly like him at that age. He described the same eyes, the same chin, even the same way of tilting his head while concentrating. He said he followed them for 3 blocks, watching the boy closely, and in that moment he felt certain. He believed the child was his. The room seemed to spin. I asked if he was saying that Ryan was his son. He answered that he believed it was possible. He explained that Meadow had been about 2 months pregnant when she left him, and if she had carried the baby to term, the child would now be exactly Ryan's age. Victor reached into his jacket and took out his phone. He showed me a photograph of himself as a child around 6 or 7 years old. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. The same dark eyes, the same firm shape of the jaw, even the same small gap between the front teeth that Ryan always tried to hide when he smiled. My hands began to shake. I said it could still be a coincidence that many children can look alike. He said that was exactly what he had told himself at first. But then he started investigating. His voice became more firm, more certain. He said he hired another investigator, someone more experienced this time. He told me that Meadow Martinez was not even her real name. Her real name was Beatrice Langford, and she had done this before. I asked what he meant. He explained that she disappeared whenever things became complicated, leaving men when they began asking too many questions. The investigator had found 2 other men, 2 different relationships that had ended the same way. She had simply vanished, as if she had never existed. Victor leaned forward, his eyes fixed on me. He said that one of those men believed she might have been pregnant when she left him as well. I felt like I could not breathe. I asked why he was telling me all of this and why now. He said that for the past 3 months he had been watching from a distance trying to decide what to do. He had been unsure if he had the right to disrupt a child's life based only on suspicion and coincidence. His voice broke slightly, but then he saw the photos from the cruise. The happy family trip. Everyone smiling and enjoying themselves. And that was when he realized something that made him feel sick. I asked what it was. He said that I was not in any of the photos. He told me he had gone through all of Meadow's social media. Hundreds of pictures from family events, birthdays, and holidays. Ryan and Sophie were in all of them. Your son Nathan appeared in most of those photos. But you were hardly there at all, almost like you were being erased from your own family's story. The truth hit me like a physical. I thought about all the missed events, all the last-minute changes, all the convenient misunderstandings. All the times I had felt like an outsider in my own family. Victor continued, saying that when he reflected on his own relationship with Meadow, he began to see the same pattern. He explained how she had slowly isolated him from his friends and family toward the end. She had made him feel like he was the problem, like he was too demanding or too dependent. She had convinced him that the people who cared about him did not really understand their relationship. He said she was doing the same thing to Nathan. I quietly said that I believed he was right. He added that she was doing it to me as well, and that if Ryan truly was his son, then the child was not the only one affected. I was a victim of it too. Victor reached into his coat again and pulled out a large envelope. He said that this was the reason he had come, the reason he had finally found the courage to knock on my door. I asked what it was. He told me it contained DNA test results. He explained that he had managed to get a sample of Ryan's hair from the barbershop where Meadow usually took him, and he had compared it to his own DNA. His hands were shaking as he passed the envelope to me. He said he had received the results just the day before. I stared at the envelope, afraid to even touch it. Inside was something that could either destroy my family or reveal the truth, and I had no idea which it would be. Before I could open it, Victor spoke again, more quietly this time. He said there was something else I needed to understand. He told me he did not want to take Ryan away from the only father the boy had ever known. He did not want to cause trauma or disrupt his life. But he could not stand by and watch Meadow continue to manipulate and deceive the people who cared about Ryan, including me. I asked him what exactly he wanted from me. He said he needed my help to make sure the child was protected from her, from whatever she had been doing to all of us. His voice had become steady, firm with resolve. He said that if she had lied about something this serious, then there was no telling what else she had lied about or who else might be hurt in the future. I looked down at the envelope in my hands, feeling its weight. Outside, I heard a car door slam, followed by the sound of children laughing as they passed by. Ordinary sounds from an ordinary afternoon in a normal neighborhood, where mothers did not take children from others, and grandmothers were not erased from family memories. But my life had not been normal for a long time. I had just refused to admit it. Victor's voice softened as he asked if I was ready to know the truth. I thought about Ryan's sweet face, about how he used to run toward me with open arms before Meadow began discouraging that closeness. I thought about Sophie, who barely knew me now because I had been pushed out of so many moments in her life. I thought about Nathan, my son, who had slowly been turned against his own mother. I thought about my empty birthday table, and all those family photos where I was missing. I said that I was ready. Then I opened the envelope. The DNA results were written in cold clinical language. They showed a 99.7% probability of paternity. The numbers blurred as I read them again and again, hoping they might somehow change, hoping this was all some terrible mistake or cruel misunderstanding. Ryan was not Nathan's son. My grandson, the little boy I had watched grow, the one I had helped learn simple things, the one I had read stories to when he was small enough to sit in my lap, was not my blood. And Nathan, my loyal son, who had named Ryan after his own grandfather, had no idea that he had been raising another man's child. Victor quietly said he was sorry. He was still sitting on my couch, watching me as I tried to process everything. He said he understood how devastating this must be. I placed the papers down, my hands still shaking. I asked how long he had known for certain. He said only since the previous day, though he had suspected it for months. He took out his phone again and showed me more photos, pictures he had clearly taken from a distance. Ryan playing in a park. Ryan walking into a school building. Ryan riding his bike along what looked like my street. He admitted that he had been following them sometimes, and that he understood how that might sound, but he said he needed to be sure. I repeated that he had been watching my family. He corrected me, saying he had been watching his son, his voice firm but not aggressive. He explained that he had been trying to understand what kind of woman could take a child and build an entire life based on a lie like that. That was when the anger came, sudden, intense, overwhelming. Not directed at Victor. He was just as much a victim as the rest of us. But at Meadow. At the scale of what she had done. At the cruelty of it. She had not only lied about who Ryan's real father was. She had built her entire marriage on that lie. She had used an innocent child as the foundation for a life that was never truly hers to claim. I said, my voice sharp and bitter, that she had trapped Nathan. She had become pregnant by another man and used that to secure a marriage with my son. Victor nodded slightly and said that it certainly appeared that way. He explained that the timeline matched perfectly. When she left him, she had been around 2 months pregnant, just beginning to show. If she moved quickly and found someone else, she could easily convince him the baby was early or simply small. I thought back to Ryan's birth. I remembered how excited Nathan had been when he called to say Meadow had gone into labor. He had said the baby arrived 3 weeks early. Nathan had been worried, but the doctors reassured him that everything was fine. Because everything had been fine. Ryan was not early. He had arrived exactly when he was supposed to, according to Victor's timeline, not Nathan's. The realization settled in with a sickening clarity. Meadow's fast-moving relationship with my son, the quick engagement, the wedding that happened barely 6 months after they met. At the time I had thought it was romantic. Now I saw something very different. She needed a father for the child before he was born. I said that she needed someone stable, someone who would not question things too closely. Victor added that she needed someone trusting, someone who would never think to ask for a paternity test. That was Nathan. Exactly. My son had always been honest, almost to a fault. He was not capable of the kind of suspicion that comes from deception. He believed people. He trusted what he was told. It was one of his best qualities. And Meadow had used it against him. Victor then said there was more. Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. He explained that the investigator he had hired had uncovered additional information about Meadow. Things that might explain why she had been pushing me out of the family. I asked what he meant. He handed me a folder. Inside were photographs, documents, and what looked like official records. He told me that Meadow Martinez was not her real name. Her real name was Beatrice Langford. She was 34 years old, not 31 as she had told Nathan. She had grown up in foster care and left the system at 18, with no real family or lasting connections. I looked at one of the photographs, which seemed to be from a school yearbook. It was clearly her but younger, harder. Her hair was darker, and there was something in her eyes that I had never noticed before. A kind of desperate intensity. Victor continued. He said she had been married before twice. Once to a man named Daniel Park in Nevada, and once to someone named Andrew Caldwell in Oregon. Both marriages had ended within 2 years. And in both cases she had received substantial alimony. I said quietly that she had done this before. He confirmed that the pattern was always the same. She would meet a man who had stability or money, move quickly into a serious relationship, and then gradually isolate him from everyone around him, friends, family, anyone who might question her or see through her behavior. I thought about Nathan's life over the past years. How his college friends had slowly disappeared. How he had grown distant from his colleagues. How he rarely spoke about his work anymore, except to say it was stressful. How he had become more and more dependent on Meadow for everything. His social life, his emotional support, his entire world. I said that she had been isolating him. Victor agreed and added that she had been doing the same to me, because I was the biggest threat to her control. He explained that mothers notice things others overlook. They ask questions. They remember how things were before someone new arrived. Then he leaned forward, his expression serious. He said that she needed me completely out of the picture, not just distant but entirely erased. And that was why the birthday party had been sabotaged. That was why there had been so many missed events and so many convenient misunderstandings. She had been carefully training the family to function without me. The cruelty of it took my breath away. But I still could not understand why. If she already had Nathan, if he believed Ryan was his son, why go to such lengths to push me out? Victor explained that I was a witness to the timeline. I remembered when they met, when she became pregnant, when Ryan was born. If I had ever started asking questions or comparing dates, I might have uncovered the truth. He said quietly but with certainty that she needed me to become irrelevant before I became dangerous. I stood up suddenly and walked to the window, looking out at the street where Ryan had learned to ride his bike. That little boy I had cheered for, cared for when he scraped his knees, and celebrated at every milestone. He was still the same child, sweet, funny, and bright. But everything about his place in our family was built on a lie. I asked about Sophie, already afraid of what the answer might be. Victor said that as far as he knew, Sophie truly was Nathan's daughter. She had been born 2 years after Ryan, at a time when Meadow and my son were definitely together. Then he hesitated. I asked what he meant. He explained that even Sophie's birth might have been intentional, a way to ensure Nathan would never question Ryan's parentage. If Meadow gave him a biological child, he would be far less likely to doubt that Ryan was his as well, and it would bind their relationship even more tightly. I felt sick. Everything about my son's marriage, his family, his life over the past 7 years had been carefully arranged by a woman who did not see him as someone to love, but as someone to use. And she had used children, innocent children, as part of that plan. I asked if Ryan knew. Victor said of course not. He was only 7 years old. As far as he understood, Nathan had always been his father. And Sophie did not know either. She simply believed she had an older brother who looked a little different. Children do not question these things. But adults do. Or at least they should. And now I understood why Meadow had worked so hard to push me out. A grandmother who spent time with her grandchildren, who was truly present in their lives, might have noticed that Ryan did not resemble his supposed father. I might have started asking questions about family traits, about details that did not quite match. I asked Victor why he had chosen to tell me all of this now. He could have gone to court, demanded a paternity test, or tried to claim custody. Why involve me? He was quiet for a long moment, looking down at his hands. Then he said that when he saw the cruise photos he realized something. Meadow was not only destroying his relationship with his son, she was destroying mine as well. And if no one stopped her, she would continue doing this to others. I asked what he meant. He explained that she had already begun pulling Nathan away from his friends and colleagues, making him more dependent on her for everything. She was also shaping how the children saw their father, making him seem like the only parent who truly mattered. He added that Ryan barely mentioned me anymore when he had observed them at the park. It was as if I was slowly being erased from the boy's memory. That realization struck me deeply. I thought about how much Ryan had changed recently. How he no longer ran to hug me when I visited. How he would look to Meadow before speaking to me, as if needing permission. I had told myself he was simply growing up. But now it seemed like something else entirely. Victor continued, saying that eventually Meadow would discard Nathan, just as she had left him and her previous husbands. But before that, she would make sure Nathan had nothing left except her and the children. No friends, no family, no support system. And when she was ready to move on, he would be completely alone. I closed my eyes and saw my son's future. Isolated, abandoned, and likely left with nothing, while the children would be caught in the middle, used in a situation they did not even understand. I asked what he wanted me to do. Victor stood up and gathered his papers and photographs. He said he wanted me to help him protect their family, both of theirs. He explained that in every way that mattered, I was Ryan's grandmother, regardless of DNA. And he would not allow Meadow to destroy that simply because she was afraid of the truth. He handed me a business card with his contact details. He told me to think about it, but not for too long. They would return from the cruise in a few days. And when they did, Meadow would be watching closely for any sign that I might become a problem again. If we were going to act, it had to be soon. After Victor left, I sat alone in my living room, holding the DNA results and staring at the card in my hand. Outside, the afternoon slowly turned into evening, and the house felt quieter than ever. But for the first time in months, the silence did not feel empty. It felt like the calm before something inevitable. Because Meadow Martinez, or Beatrice Langford, or whatever her real name truly was, had made a serious mistake. She had believed she could erase me completely, make me irrelevant in my own family's story. But I was still here. And now that I knew who she really was, I was not going anywhere. I called Nathan 3 days after they returned from the cruise. My voice was calm and controlled. I had gone over this conversation many times in my head. I greeted him warmly and said I was wondering if we could all have dinner together that weekend. I told him there was something important I wanted to discuss with him and Meadow. There was a pause. He asked if everything was all right and said I sounded serious. I reassured him that everything was fine and explained that I simply felt it was time for a real family conversation. About us and about the future. I mentioned that I had been thinking a lot while they were away. There was another pause, longer this time. I could hear Meadow speaking in the background, though I could not make out her words. When Nathan returned to the call, his tone had changed. He sounded more cautious. He said Meadow wanted to know what kind of conversation this would be. She was worried that I might still be upset about the timing of the cruise. Of course she was worried. Meadow's instincts were sharp. She could likely sense that something had changed, even through a simple phone call. I told him to let her know I was not upset about anything. I said I just believed families should communicate openly. I suggested that Saturday evening would be perfect and added that I would cook. He said he would check with Meadow and call me back. The fact that my 38-year-old son needed to ask his wife for permission to have dinner with his own mother would have been almost amusing, if it had not been so painful. But I kept my tone light and told him to let me know. He called back 2 hours later and confirmed that Saturday would work. I said that was perfect and that I was looking forward to seeing them all. That conversation happened on Thursday. On Friday, I prepared for what I knew would be the most important discussion of my life. Victor and I had met 2 more times since his first visit. Together, we carefully planned how to present the truth in a way that would protect Ryan, while also exposing Meadow's lies. The DNA results were placed inside a manila folder on my kitchen counter, along with copies of the documents Victor's investigator had uncovered. Her real identity, her past marriages, the timeline that proved Ryan could not be Nathan's biological son. Everything we needed to reveal the truth she had built her life on. I cooked Nathan's favorite meal, pot roast with garlic mashed potatoes and green beans, just like he had loved since he was a child. If this was going to be the last family dinner we ever shared, I wanted it to begin like a good memory. Saturday evening arrived gray and rainy, the kind of typical October weather that made everything feel heavier. I set the dining table with my best china, the same dishes I had prepared for my birthday dinner 2 weeks earlier. The irony did not escape me. They arrived exactly at 6 in the evening. Meadow was wearing a soft cream-colored dress that made her appear younger and almost innocent. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like someone who could never deceive anyone. Ryan rushed in first, full of excitement and energy. He told me that he had learned to swim on the cruise and eagerly asked if I wanted to see how he could do the doggy paddle. My heart tightened as I hugged him, knowing that what I was about to reveal would change everything for him. I gently told him that maybe he could show me after dinner and asked him to go wash his hands. Sophie came in more quietly, holding a small doll with messy hair. At 5 years old, she was more reserved than her brother and had become more distant from me since Meadow began discouraging their closeness. Still, she allowed me to kiss her on the forehead before following Ryan. Nathan hugged me warmly and for a brief moment, it almost felt like everything was normal again. He commented that something smelled wonderful and said he had missed my cooking. I looked at him closely and noticed how tired he seemed. There were new lines around his eyes, and he had clearly lost weight. He admitted that work had been very stressful lately, mentioning that recent changes had affected everyone. He glanced at Meadow, who was quietly observing the room, as if evaluating something. She stepped closer and, with her usual pleasant smile, said she had been encouraging Nathan to think about a better balance between work and life, explaining that stress was harmful to his health. She even mentioned the idea of early retirement so they could travel more and spend additional time with the children. Early retirement at 38. Another way to make Nathan dependent on her, cutting him off from his work, his independence, and his identity. I smiled politely and said it was wonderful that she was thinking about the future. That's actually connected to what I wanted to talk about tonight. During dinner, I kept everything light. The children talked excitedly about their cruise, and Meadow played the perfect mother, cutting Ryan's food and reminding Sophie to use her napkin. She was very good at it. Warm, attentive, completely convincing. But this time I noticed things I had not seen before. The way she interrupted when Ryan began telling a story about missing me while they were away. The way she redirected Sophie when the little girl asked why I had not gone on the trip with them. The way she quietly controlled every interaction, managing the flow of conversation and even affection. After the children finished eating, I suggested they go play in the living room while the adults talked. Meadow objected immediately, saying they should probably get ready to leave soon since it was a school night, and they liked to keep the children's routine consistent. I replied firmly that it would not take long and added that what I needed to share might affect their routine more than expected. For just a moment, something passed across Meadow's face. Fear. When the children were settled with their toys in the next room, I went back to the dining room where Nathan and Meadow were waiting. The manila folder sat on the table next to my coffee cup like something dangerous. Nathan reached for Meadow's hand and asked what I wanted to discuss. I took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment, and said I wanted to talk about honesty, about family, and about how important it is to know who we truly are. Meadow's smile tightened slightly, and she remarked that it sounded a bit too philosophical for a dinner conversation. I said I did not think so. Then I picked up the folder. I could feel both of them tense. I explained that I had recently learned some important things about family history, genetics, and the importance of accurate medical information. Nathan slowly asked what was inside the folder. I told him it was the truth. I opened it and took out the DNA results, placing them on the table between us. I explained that these were the results of a paternity test for Ryan. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Nathan stared at the papers as if they might suddenly catch fire. Meadow went completely still, her face carefully expressionless. Nathan asked quietly why such a test had been done and how it was even possible. I told him gently that the results showed he was not Ryan's biological father. There was a 99.7% probability that another man, Victor Lynn, was. Meadow stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She said this was insane and accused me of playing some kind of cruel game. I told her firmly to sit down and addressed her by her real name, Beatrice. The effect was immediate. She stepped back, her face turning pale. Nathan looked between us, confusion and growing fear in his expression, asking what was happening. I took out the investigator's report, the marriage records, and the timeline. I explained that Meadow's real name was Beatrice Langford, that she had been married twice before, and had a pattern of lying about her identity and her past. I told him she had been with Victor Lynn before meeting him, and that she had left Victor while pregnant, looking for someone else to raise the child. Meadow denied everything, but her voice was shaking now. She told Nathan not to listen and claimed that I was not thinking clearly. I continued. I reminded Nathan that Ryan had been born 7 months after they met. He had believed the baby was premature, but that was not true. The timing matched perfectly with Meadow's relationship with Victor. Nathan picked up the DNA results with trembling hands. I watched his face as he read them. I watched the color drain from his cheeks as the numbers sank in. He whispered that it could not be right. I told him that Victor had been searching for his son for 7 years, that he had found them 3 months earlier and had been watching from a distance, trying to decide what to do. I explained that he came to me because he recognized the same pattern of isolation Meadow had used on him. Meadow was backing toward the doorway now, her composure completely gone. She begged Nathan not to let me turn him against her, and told him to think about their life together, about their family. Nathan repeated her words, but now they sounded broken. Their family. A family built on a lie. A son who was not truly his. Meadow insisted that Ryan was still his son in every way that mattered, that he had raised him and loved him. Nathan slammed his hand against the table, making the dishes rattle. He said everything had been a lie. From the living room came the sound of the children laughing, bright and innocent, completely unaware that everything was falling apart in the next room. I quietly said there was more. Then I placed the records of her previous marriages on the table. I explained that she had done this before, meeting men, marrying them quickly, isolating them from their families, and then leaving when it suited her. I told Nathan he was not the first, only the most successful. Nathan stared at the documents, his breathing uneven. Then he suddenly mentioned the cruise. My birthday. He asked if that had been intentional. Meadow said nothing. But her silence answered him. He said she had planned it deliberately, making sure I would be alone while they were all together, enjoying themselves without me. He said she had wanted to hurt me. Meadow began to respond, saying she had only wanted to protect their family. He asked what she had been protecting it from. From his mother. From the woman who raised me, loved me, and would never hurt anyone. From someone who would eventually discover the truth, I said quietly. I explained that this had been the reason behind everything. The missed events, the last-minute changes, the slow distance from friends and family. Meadow had needed to isolate him completely before he could begin asking questions she would not be able to answer. Nathan looked at her. At his wife, who was not who she claimed to be, whose entire life with him had been built on deception. He asked if any of it had been real, if she had ever truly loved him, or if he had simply been convenient. For the first time since I had known her, Meadow had no response. No smooth explanation. No manipulation. No carefully chosen words. She just stood there in silence. And that silence told us everything. From the living room, Ryan's voice called out, asking if they could have ice cream. Nathan closed his eyes and I saw a tear fall down his cheek. He asked quietly what he was supposed to tell the children, how he could possibly explain this to them. I reached across the table and took his hand, telling him we would figure it out together as a family. I reminded him that Ryan was still his son in every way that mattered, and that would not change. But I also said that Ryan had a biological father who loved him and wanted to be part of his life, and that if we handled things carefully, it could become something positive. Meadow turned toward the door, but I stopped her by calling her real name. She paused, though she did not turn back. I told her that Victor was not going to disappear this time, and neither was I. I warned her that if she tried to run with the children, we would find her. And if she tried to manipulate the situation or harm the children to protect herself, we would stop her. I told her that her control over this family was over. She walked out without saying another word, leaving behind the sound of children playing and the ruins of 7 years of lies. But for the first time in months, I did not feel like I was losing my family. I felt like I was finally getting it back. 6 months later, I was standing in my kitchen preparing Sunday dinner when I heard the front door open and Ryan's voice calling out that they had brought dessert. I called back to him, smiling as I heard small footsteps rushing toward me. Ryan ran into the kitchen holding a bakery box that was almost too big for him to carry. Sophie followed behind him more carefully, holding a small bouquet of daisies. She shyly said the flowers were for me and mentioned that her father had told her yellow was my favorite color. I knelt down, accepted the bouquet, and hugged her. This time she did not hesitate to hug me back. I told her the flowers were perfect and thanked her. Nathan stepped into the doorway, looking healthier than he had in a long time. The weight he had lost had returned, and the tension in his face had softened. Behind him stood Victor, still a little unsure in family settings, but slowly finding his place in our new and complicated family. Nathan said something smelled wonderful and kissed my cheek, asking if I had made my apple pie. I told him that Ryan had specifically requested it, along with mashed potatoes and the chicken dish he used to love, the one with herbs. Ryan's face lit up as he said it was his favorite too, just like his father's. Hearing him call both Nathan and Victor Dad still felt unusual, but the children had adjusted with the resilience that children often have. Ryan called Nathan Dad and Victor Dad Dave, while Sophie simply accepted that her brother had 2 fathers, just like some of her friends had 2 homes. Victor placed a bottle of wine on the counter, moving carefully as if still adjusting to the space that had once belonged to Meadow. He asked how he could help. I told him he could set the table, and that the good china was in the dining room cabinet. It had taken months to reach this point. Months of therapy, careful conversations, and legal steps that ended with Meadow giving up custody in exchange for avoiding charges of fraud. She had disappeared again, just as she had from Victor's life 7 years earlier. But this time she had left the children behind. The transition had not been easy. Ryan had been confused and hurt by her sudden absence. Sophie had become anxious and clingy, afraid that others might leave as well. There had been tears, sleepless nights, and difficult moments for all of us. But there had also been healing. Nathan had stayed in the house he once shared with Meadow, but everything felt different now. The tension and secrecy were gone. Victor had rented an apartment nearby, close enough to be present, but far enough to give everyone space. Ryan tugged on my apron and asked if he could tell me a secret. I knelt down and told him he could. He leaned in and whispered that he was happy I had found Dad Dave, because now he had more fathers than anyone else in his class. My heart filled with love for this child who had turned something complicated into something positive. I told him I was happy too. Then he added quietly that he was glad his mother was gone, saying she had always seemed angry about something. It broke my heart to hear that, but it also confirmed that we had made the right decision. Children often understand more than we think, and even if he could not explain it, Ryan had felt the tension all along. During dinner, the conversation moved easily between the adults, while the children talked excitedly about school and their friends. Victor shared a story about Ryan's latest soccer game, where he had scored his very first goal. Nathan spoke about how excited Sophie was to begin her dance classes. We talked like a real family. Maybe not a conventional one, but something genuine, something that Meadow's carefully constructed version had never truly been. Nathan mentioned that he had received a call from his lawyer the day before, saying that the divorce was finally finalized. I asked him how he felt about it. He paused for a moment, watching Ryan help Victor with the dishes, then said he mostly felt relieved and grateful that everything had ended without causing more harm to the children. I asked if he had any regrets. He said not about ending the marriage, but he did regret not seeing the truth sooner. He admitted that he would probably always regret how much time had been lost and how much pain had been caused. I gently squeezed his shoulder and told him he could not blame himself for trusting someone he loved, that it was not a weakness, just part of being human. Victor joined us, drying his hands, and asked if there had been any news from Meadow. Nathan said there had been none. Her lawyer had made it clear that she did not want any contact with the children. No visits, no calls, nothing. I said that it was probably for the best, even though it still surprised me how completely a mother could walk away from her children. At least this way, the children could heal without fear of her returning and disrupting their lives again. Later, after the children had fallen asleep in the living room while watching a movie, the three of us sat at the kitchen table with coffee and leftover pie. These quiet evening conversations had become some of my favorite moments. Victor said he had been thinking about something, about Ryan's last name. Nathan looked up, surprised, and asked what he meant. Victor explained that Ryan had always been Whitaker, that it was his identity, part of his life, his school records, everything. He said he did not want to change that. But then he carefully suggested something else. He asked if it would be alright if he added the name Whitaker to his own, making it official so that he and Ryan would share part of a name, while still keeping Ryan connected to Nathan and our family. The thoughtfulness of that gesture, the care behind it, brought tears to my eyes. Nathan looked surprised, then deeply moved. Victor explained that he wanted Ryan to understand that families can be complicated without being broken. That loving someone does not mean choosing sides or ignoring other relationships. Nathan reached across the table and shook his hand, saying it was a perfect idea. As the evening came to an end and Victor prepared to take the children for their overnight stay, I pulled him aside. I thanked him quietly. He asked what for. I told him it was for saving my family, for having the courage to tell me the truth when it would have been easier to walk away. He paused, watching Ryan gather his things, and said that when he first came to my door, he realized something important. He was not the only one losing a child. I was losing my family too. Meadow had been taking all of us away from each other piece by piece. But we had stopped her. He smiled then, truly smiled, and said we had built something new instead. I looked around my home, the children's drawings on the refrigerator, Sophie's sweater left behind on a chair, the updated family photos that now included Victor and reflected who we really were. It was not the family I had imagined years ago, but it was far better than the illusion Meadow had created. After everyone left, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, thinking about how much my life had changed since that painful birthday 6 months earlier. The house that once felt empty now held the echoes of family. Children's laughter, quiet conversations, plans for the future. My phone buzzed with a message from Nathan. He thanked me for dinner and said the children were already asking if we could make it a weekly tradition. I replied that every Sunday sounded perfect because that was what families did. He responded quickly, agreeing that this was what real families did. I set the phone aside and looked at the framed photo on the table. It was from a recent trip to the zoo. All 5 of us standing together. Ryan on Victor's shoulders. Sophie holding my hand. Nathan in the middle smiling, one arm around me and the other around Victor. We looked exactly like what we had become. A family that had been broken and rebuilt into something stronger and more honest. Not traditional but real. Not perfect but true. The house grew quiet as night settled in, but it no longer felt empty. It felt full. Full of possibility, full of love. The kind of love Meadow had tried to destroy but never fully could. I had once believed that my 65th birthday marked the end of my place in my family's story. Instead, it marked the beginning of something new. A chapter where love was not conditional, where truth mattered more than appearances, and where being a grandmother meant protecting the people you love, no matter who you had to stand against. The next day was Monday, which meant Ryan had soccer practice and Sophie had her dance class. Victor would pick Ryan up, while Nathan would take Sophie, and afterward they would all come back here for homework and dinner. It was a routine that once would have been controlled and carefully managed by Meadow, but now it unfolded naturally, guided by genuine care for one another. As I turned off the lights and went upstairs, I thought about the woman who had tried to erase me from my own family's life. Somewhere, Meadow was likely creating a new identity, building another story, searching for another family to step into and control. But she had left something behind that she would never be able to recreate. The bond between people who chose to stand by each other instead of walking away. In a strange way, she had shown us exactly what we did not want to become. And because of that, she had helped shape us into who we truly were meant to be. For that alone, perhaps I owed her a kind of twisted gratitude. But more than anything, I felt sorry for her. She had once held a real family in her hands, imperfect and complicated but real. And she had thrown it away for the empty satisfaction of control. Her loss had become our gain. And after months of feeling invisible in my own life, I finally felt like I was home. Now I am curious about you, the one who listened to my story. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts below. And on the final screen, I am leaving 2 more stories that are favorites on this channel, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until the end.